Hey everybody, my name is Ryan Grover. I'm the Sewell C. Curator of American Art here at the Biggs Museum. And I put together this exhibition. It's sort of a little miniature exhibition over about 2-3 month period of time that sort of features a lot of our new accessions, new objects that have been added to the permanent collection here at the Biggs Museum. Some are gifts, some are purchases, and there are even a few things here that are being considered for the permanent collection as we speak. So they're not even actually a part of the collection just yet, but it's a way for us to start fleshing out ideas and to get inspiration from you all about what you think is important to add to our collection here at the Biggs. So with this idea of participation, I had an idea, Kristen and I had an idea actually just about a half hour ago over Indian food, that we were going to get your inspiration, get your influence on what pieces we should be talking about. We have probably close to like 25 works on view here today, so we're not going to be able to hit on all of them, but we will start off in certain sections talking to you about some of our favorites. And as we're talking, take a look in your sections and we will ask you to tell us which ones we should talk about next. So we'll take this as a first step. You'll be able to use your chat option. If you hover your cursor over the picture of your Zoom conversation, if the Zoom image, if you hover your cursor over it, it'll give you options either at the top or bottom of your computer screen. One of those options is called the chat option. Type in whatever pieces you think we should talk about next, and I'll see if I can hit them. Those that, and of course, those who respond the fastest are normally the ones that we're going to be talking about first. So stay tuned. But first, to sort of kick this off, I'm going to talk a little bit about the painting right here over my left shoulder. This is a work by a woman named Carrie and Daddy. Carrie did her graduate work here at the University of Delaware in Newark, Delaware, a number of years ago. And as she was finishing up her graduate program, she won a fellowship from a local state organization called the Delaware Division of the Arts. The Delaware Division of the Arts uses state and federal funds to help support artists through fellowship programs, but they also support almost every arts organization within the state, probably every arts organization within the state, with general operating funds. They've been a long-term supporter of the museum, and to show our appreciation and to also share the great things that they're doing through the fellowship program, we have here at the museum now for 20 years been exhibiting all of their fellowship winners every summer. So they make their announcements in January, and we at the Biggs Museum invite all of those fellowship winners. These are literary, visual art, as well as performing artists into one group show here at the museum. Sometimes it's upstairs, sometimes it's on the first floor, sometimes we integrate it within the permanent collection. Every year is different. And of course, every year features the best of Delaware, which is great. So Carrie was actually a person who had won a number of years ago. And as we have celebrated anniversaries of this award winners program, this project, this exhibition that we do every summer, we had invited Carrie back to exhibit her work. And Carrie has had this really consistent approach to her painting. She likes big compositions, and she uses a lot of art historical subject matter. Sometimes the subject matter is medieval, sometimes it's classical, sometimes it's from the Renaissance. And she uses these art historical references in her paintings, and then she creates these kind of surrealist subjects around them. She creates these narratives that sort of talk about sort of subconscious influences, emotional states of being. Sometimes they're kind of racy and get kind of erotic, but recently, we had asked Carrie to be involved in our 20th anniversary of the award winners program. And from that exhibition, we made the decision that we would purchase this work. Now, Carrie and Daddy is part of the fine art faculty at, I think it's Florida State University. And she's held that position for a number of years, but she's also exhibiting internationally. She's been represented by a couple of galleries here within the United States, and most recently she was exhibiting this work along with several others in Spain, just as the COVID outbreak started. We were attracted to this not only because we thought it was a great evocation of 2020, but because it represented so much of what it is that she's best known for. So she uses these sort of medieval to Renaissance figures in the back, or sort of the middle ground here, and they are opening up the sort of metaphorical mouth of hell. And inside the mouth of this two-headed beast, two heads but one mouth, are these just really inspired sort of depiction of what happens in hell. This very sort of Christian philosophical idea about what hell is, and altogether, it just becomes this incredible sort of allegorical subject. Now, one of the things that I want you to pay attention to is that Carrie uses a number of different types of applications, different ways of painting. So the detailed sort of work that you see with these kind of dramatic, these kind of almost romantic brushstrokes that you see within the Hellmouth stands in contrast, if we pan right, to some of the patterned use of painting in the textiles, which is kind of a play on medieval traditions in painting. And then if we sort of pan backwards into a larger image, we get these much sort of softer tones, this much looser brushstroke of so much of what's happening in the background. Of course, the greatest detail is going to be in the thing that she's trying to get you to take a look at, and really what she's asking you to sort of engage in most deeply are these depictions of hell swirling around within the beast's mouth, and then to the figures, and then ultimately into the setting behind it, this kind of dreamlike setting that's behind it. You should definitely look up her website, Carrie and Daddy, because she's pretty brilliant. And I think that you will really, really enjoy sort of getting to know her work better. And I'm really, really delighted to finally have her represented here within the museum. So as you are standing there, I'm going to push back our sort of camera a few feet. And I want you to take a quick look at the space that's around us. First, I want you to sort of focus on the silver sculpture that's here by Michael Gallmer. And then if we pan to your left on this opposite wall, a very new addition to the collection by a woman named Eunice Lafayette. She's a folk artist in Wilmington, Delaware. And then over my right shoulder, we see a pretty grand scale work by a woman named Rebecca Raubacher, painter in Rehoboth, Delaware. Now, of these three extra pieces in this section, type in which ones you would like to learn more about. Michael Gallmer, Eunice Lafayette, or Becky Raubacher. So we've got a few more seconds to make your decision.
Our first one in is Eunice Lafayette.
Excellent. Eunice Lafayette it is. So Eunice Lafayette, she was originally from Jamaica. She has lived here originally with her husband, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But she and her husband lived in the Wilmington area for a number of years. She actually started painting in Jamaica, and it was a way for her, painting in Jamaica painting Jamaican scenes was a way for her to sort of remember her homeland. Eunice Lafayette, if I'm remembering this correctly, she is of both African as well as Irish descent in her Jamaican ancestry. And because of sort of multicultural world that she grew up in, the multicultural background that she had within her own family, and then also within the multicultural space that she moved to in Wilmington, Delaware. All of this reinforced a message that she puts forward in a lot of her work around sort of social love, social justice, and unity between the races. And I thought that we've been exhibiting Eunice Lafayette's work here at the museum for as long as I've been here, so for close to 20 years. And it seemed like we had, with this particular work entitled Tribute to Kobe of 2020, it seemed like we had the perfect opportunity to be able to represent her really well within the permanent collection here at the Biggs, by representing some of the things that she does really, really well. Now, she still deals a lot with her subject matter of Jamaica. She also deals with more compositions that are more specifically abstract. So a lot of sort of oversimplifications of the subject matter to sort of talk about particular colors or shapes or movement. But in this particular work, Tribute to Kobe, I really thought that we were picking up on her love affair of all people and the mixture of people together, the happiness and the sort of joy that can come from bringing people from different backgrounds together into one space. And Eunice Lafayette runs her own Lafayette Gallery on Market Street in downtown Wilmington, where she talks a lot about her own work, but she also displays the artworks of a lot of other individuals from the Wilmington area, as well as members of her own family. And she keeps regular hours even during COVID, and she is an absolute joy to get to know. She is truly one of the more important artists, I think, working in Wilmington right now, and she's contributing an enormous amount to the community in that area. So stop by on Market Street. You can pick up one of her works, one of her prints. The kids can take one of her art classes, and you can get to know a little bit more about Wilmington that way. So follow me. We're going to move into the next section of the gallery, and we will pick our first painting to talk about from there. So I'm going to fall onto an old reliable. It's not really an old reliable because we've only owned it for a couple of years, but I actually talk about this painting quite a bit because I adore it. This work is by Tom Wilson, and it's entitled Summer Day, Milton, Delaware. It was painted in 1983, and it's an oil on canvas. And I'll just give you a second to sort of meditate on it. Tom Wilson is originally from Delaware. Or I should say was originally from Delaware. He unfortunately passed away in 1995. He was born in, I think, 1946. So he was very young when he passed away. And unfortunately, he passed away due to complications to the AIDS virus. While he was still here in Delaware, he was originally from sort of the Georgetown, he was from Sussex County, and spent a lot of time at the beach, studied with, if I remember correctly, his first art lessons were with Dorothy Lewis, the wife of the eminent watercolor painter, Jack Lewis. And then he also took classes from Howard Schroeder before he left Wilmington to finish up high school in Rhode Island, a private school in Rhode Island. And then he eventually transferred into RISD. He finished up school in RISD in, I believe, 1969, and immediately moved to New York City. There he was painting, he was doing portraits, he started to do a lot of abstract and sort of highly stylized paintings of sort of the rhythmic use of dots of different colors. So they became these kind of very structured, very composed groupings of abstract forms that were connected by these grids of dots, these kind of ribbons of dots. They kind of remind me of Willy Wonka and sort of sugar dots from paper you might get at candy stores. But he was discovered as a model in 1969 and very quickly started to do very well as a male fashion model in the early 1970s. By the mid 1970s, he was living in Paris. He was modeling very extensively, and he was still painting, not only the abstract works, but he was also painting at that point a number of portraits. In the late 70s, 1980, if I remember correctly, I believe his father became ill, and he moved back to Delaware to help take care of his father and to basically pursue painting full time. And it was in this period in the late 70s, very, very first part of the 80s, that he started to experiment with photorealist painting. So this means that he was painting in such a way that the surface, the way that the paint is applied to the surface and without noticeable brush strokes and with a real crisp linear application of paint, so that you have these very, very sharp angled subjects within the work. It implies this, it gives you the impression of looking into a large scale photograph, but in all actuality, you are looking into an oil painting. These were very labor intensive. He was really only ever able to create about a dozen or so of this magnitude within a single year. And interestingly, while he was represented in a couple of galleries, both in Delaware, in Baltimore, as well as in Washington, D.C., he did his best sales out of a restaurant called the Back Porch in Rehoboth, where he sold dozens and dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of works over the years. He really kind of supported himself in art sales from the sales directly from the Back Porch, which is really, really fun. So the Back Porch still exists on, I think it's Rehoboth Avenue in downtown Rehoboth. And you can still find Tom Wilson paintings hanging in the restaurant today. By about 1983, he met his life partner, and they lived in a little cottage in Lewis. Tom Wilson conducted art classes in the area, and he painted these magnificent works. And then, as far as my research, I've been able to sort of ascertain so far, he was diagnosed in around 1993 with HIV and ultimately succumbed to it in 1995. There are a real limited number of these works in circulation. They're almost never, once they are in private hands, they are very rarely outside of private hands. We have been very fortunate to be able to collect two of these works. This one, which we've owned for a couple of years, and one that is very recent to the collection that is still in conservation, but depicts the only known view of Dover, the city of Dover, that Tom Wilson was known to have created. So that is Tom Wilson. I hope you feel very enriched by knowing a little bit more about him. But I'm going to have you pan out a little bit, and we'll give you some new options. The first potential is another photorealist work by Greg Mort, a highly abstracted piece by Judith Blam, the most abstract piece by Willem de Looper, or we could talk about this little chest by Michael Quattrocchi. So meditate upon your choices. But first is Greg Mort, Judith Blam, Willem de Looper, or Mike Quattrocchi. Just call him Mike. It's impossible to spell his last name. I have spelled it a million times and I still get it wrong. We'll give you a few seconds to make your choice there. I'm kind of hoping that you pick the big one. Or alternatively, we can also talk a little bit about the cabinet. So we're going to give you 10 more seconds to be able to make that choice. We're down to about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. And what choice have we made?
They said whatever you want.
Whatever I want. All right, I'm going to talk about the cabinet. And maybe I'll jump on the painting, who knows. We have an artist membership here at the Biggs Museum that has existed for a number of years called Delaware by Hand. Originally, Delaware by Hand started as its own nonprofit organization, and and I was one of its board members, along with a number of very, very talented artists within the area. We were not very successful in getting other board members. And the group of us, all volunteer, we're getting kind of exhausted after a number of years. And so I hatched this plan to absorb Delaware by Hand into the membership here at the Biggs Museum, that they would become basically artist members of the museum. And that we would here try to keep up a level of programming that they would be able to participate in, that they would be able to lead as workshop teachers, as well as to be able to sell their handmade works, mostly contemporary craft, in our gift store. And then that we would host a number of sales opportunities through the year. The one that I think that we're best known for is the Memorial Day weekend, the Saturday sale that happens in Lewis at Zwannendale Park. A long-term member of that group was Mike Crotchachaki. And unfortunately, he and his wife, unfortunately for us, fortunately for him, he and his wife, I believe, moved to Florida just a few years ago. But Mike had been a purchase prize winner for our jury competition of the Delaware by Hand membership of the Biggs Museum. And that competition happens every 3 to 4 years or so. So the last time that, or one of the last times that we held that competition, actually, I think it was 2 times ago that we held that competition, he submitted, amongst a number of other things, this remarkably beautiful cabinet. Now, this cabinet is, and you can see these are sort of drawer pulls and dust covers for jewelry containers. There are trays in here that can be moved out. But everything is perfectly fit. To work into these individual drawers. Here are a set of compartments if you're a watch collector. And you can imagine, with the level of hand detail of this cabinet maker's work, just how expensive and luxurious these objects are. Also, just sort of take a second to sort of take in the different kinds of wood that are being present here. I don't even necessarily know them all. Walnut, cherry, looking like some sort of maple, maybe what they call a spalted maple, but definitely sort of a tiger striped maple, as well as these very unusual sort of what do they call these, burls that the whole chest sits upon. Now, this is kind of a take on an old 17th, 18th century type of object that we would find in this part of the world, often referred to as sort of a spice chest or a valuables chest. And it was basically a place where you would be able to store precious objects. And very expensive objects under lock and key. Now that there's no lock in place for this particular piece, I guess they assume that you're already in an alarmed building, but it is the piece itself, the object that holds all of your valuables, is already sort of a work of art by itself. I hope that you are able to pick up the wave pattern of the top that was created here. So almost sort of a trompe l'oeil, sort of to fool the eye, sort of wave pattern where the whole idea of the wooden top just sort of curls and bends. My favorite thing that Mike Kwachachaki ever produced, and he actually had it on display here at an exhibition a number of years ago, was an artist case with the same exacting sort of detail that you see in the watch and valuables cabinet here. The case would have the case unfolds and small dishes and containers and sort of storage spaces all would be able to be carefully sort of set aside and then carried with this large strap. It was the most remarkable thing, but it would have set me back maybe probably 2 months on my mortgage to be able to purchase it, unfortunately. But we were super, super proud to be able to bring this piece into the collection and to be able to show off that level of craftsmanship that happens not only in the state, but amongst our own members here at the museum. So as we start to pan back a little bit, I am going to pass by the Willem de Looper just a second before as we move into the next section of the exhibition. And the Willem de Looper is just a terrific piece. This was a gift from the estate of Philip M. Smith, and it's called Fawn. This is, Willem de Looper was a second generation member of the Washington Color School. So this is a group of artists that were really, really interested in, starting in the late 1950s, but especially in the 1960s, they were very interested in this new artistic medium of acrylic paint that people were using in art, in fine art. And so this is acrylic paint with tubes. Before this, people were pretty much confined either to watercolor and gouache, water-based paints, or to oil-based paints. But here, acrylic paints could be used like watercolor paints. They could be diluted, and then they could be poured over unprimed canvas and soaked up like exactly what it is. So you're just sort of playing with the idea of the medium itself, where the liquid form of the paint sort of dripping through cloth becomes sort of an homage to craft and sort of dyeing techniques, really. But then you're also able to layer up those surfaces with less translucent, more opaque quantities of that acrylic paint. So you can start to see the dabs done in the white, the darker blue, and the red that sort of runs through here. So there is a pouring effect. There is a stamping effect, almost like the canvas was rolled to get these repeated squashed forms. There is a painted effect where the paint, or maybe a palette knife, has applied some of the acrylic paint onto the surface. And then there is this sort of dripping, this kind of pouring, and you can just sort of see these sort of red and pink streaks down the surface of the work. This is just this is a very fun exploration of medium, and it's one of the things that a lot of the Washington Color School artists were really, really involved with. And it's just terrific. I just love it. Very expressive, and just such a great evocation of its moment. So I'm going to meet you over here.
Ryan, we have a request to repeat the name of this painting.
It's called Fawn by Willem de Looper. What to talk about? Well, this one's easy to see. And then maybe as we're sitting here, maybe we'll also talk about an 18th century valuables chest over here as well. And of course, the moment that I said that we should talk about this, I completely forget who the artist is. Richard Catton Woodville. Woodville died at a very young age. He was only about 39 years old, and I believe he died in around 1855, 1856. So he was a Baltimore artist, known principally a little bit for portraiture, but really known for developing genre painting within America. Genre painting is sort of scenes of everyday life in America, and they often have this real moralistic kind of edge to them, sort of like the artist or whoever has commissioned the work is really trying to get across a story or a moralistic tale, some kind of lesson in morality in a lot of the imagery. So Woodville is known for, he did not create an enormous number of paintings, and all of his paintings are pretty much in museum hands already. They're never going to come back to auction. They're going to be shared to the public in large quantities of people. In a lot of them are in Maryland institutions and Baltimore institutions, as a matter of fact. But there are some really wonderful hand-painted lithographs, reproductions of some of those paintings. paintings that he would have done in the late 1840s, the very first part of the 1850s. And so this is the sailor's wedding. Here, the sailor in the center with his bride looking like Queen Victoria. The painting is, I'm trying to remember, it is an institution in Baltimore, but the painting was done in 1852. And the print was created in Paris in 1855. There are not a lot of these prints available. They do sometimes come up at auction. This is being offered as a gift to the museum right now. So our board of trustees are considering this object as an end of year gift to the museum. So what's happening here? There is a whole wedding party. There is the sailor, his bride, the family members behind him. Here is the judge that is being sort of forced into action begrudgingly. He's kind of a curmudgeon because this party is needing to get married as quickly as possible. We always have this sort of question mark, well, why do people speed into weddings? And you can use your own imagination in that. There are, especially for our purposes, an interesting variety of different types of people depicted in this work. So you not only, like I said, see the judge, you see the sort of the couple of the marine work, but you also see potentially enslaved laborers flanking and bearing witness to the sort of actions that are happening within this work. And also what's of interest to us is the depiction of the interior space in 1852. You can see pretty well the depiction of these patterned wallpapers, the sort of ebonized or black painted surface of the fireplace surround. The table, the chair, and other kind of interior furnishings that would be being used basically at this time frame. Now, I've seen one other version of this print, and interestingly, a lot of the paint applications are very different every time that you see one. So the other version that I saw was actually a little bit darker interior. The white highlighted sections of her wedding dress, while it is a dress that she's wearing to a wedding, were not as brightly picked out. Some of the blues were a little bit paler, but some of the other pinks were much brighter. It's very, very interesting that each piece that you have, even though this is ultimately a reproduction, each piece that you come across is slightly different. So as we sort of pan around this space, I want to sort of point out a new gift to the museum of the Frank Schoonover illustration. This is a wonderful illustration that we brought into the museum probably a year or two ago, but we brought it out recently to celebrate Halloween because there's a dead person in it. It's entitled, "You Know I Had to Do It, Didn't You?" And so the woman has just murdered the man on his back. And then there is another gentleman that's trying to basically take his pulse to see if he's actually dead. It's wonderful and gory and exactly what it is that you hope for late 19th, early 20th century illustrations from Frank Schoonover. One of the things that's very interesting about this one, as we've just talked about the Woodville, is the depiction of the interior. So lots of the jars and different kinds of objects that you see on the shelf, the sort of depiction of this fully realized interior space. A lot of those little objects were actually can still be found in Frank Schoonover's studio in Wilmington, Delaware. And so it's just really, really wonderful to sort of see how the artist has incorporated so many of these ideas into this painting. But the other thing in this space that I really wanted to share with you was this second valuables chest. And I'm just going to check my time real quick. We're good. This was one of the key objects that we added to the museum's collection during our recent 25th anniversary. And it's a truly, truly wonderful thing. So this is, and you probably can make it out on the surface, there is a R and A over L, or excuse me, an L over R and A. And so we see the L stands for Lambert, the Lambert family of Southern Chester County. And then I believe it was Robert and Anna. And this was a chest that was created 1 year after they were married in 1747. This is dated 1748. This is one of only a small number, probably no more than perhaps a dozen valuables chests from southern Chester County, just over the Delaware border, that are dated before 1750. This is an incredibly rare object. There are valuables chests that are later than this time. We have a couple here at the museum, but there are very, very few that are dated before 1750. And this represents one of the earliest pieces of furniture that we have in the collection. Not the earliest, but among the earliest in the collection. This is a wonderful, wonderful object, and it's just really, really expressive. I'm so delighted to have been able to bring this in. So we're going to open up the chest and just have you swing open this door. And I just want you to take it in for a second. All of the hardware, the lock, the key, all the little brass knobs that you see here, these are all, as far as we can tell, are original to the chest. These things are often lost. They often get replaced out. As far as anybody can tell, though, these are all original to this chest. Now, this would be a little bit more difficult to be able to demonstrate, but one of the things that I want to sort of point out to you is that if you see that there is this large area here, so the top drawers, so you have the bottom drawers, middle drawers here and here, these small drawers on either side, you have these two sort of compartments, and you've probably seen different kinds of forms like this on some 18th and 19th century, like roll top desks and other kinds of desk and bookcase forms. That's fairly common, but there's this whole space up above from the top of the storage, this portion of the storage, to the top here. That's because there are actually 3 hidden drawers that are only accessible from the back of the chest. Now, how you get into them. The first thing you do is you lift up on this molded piece here. You bring this surface up. You can sort of see that it sort of slides up and down. So you bring it up, you pull this work out entirely. This becomes the first secret compartment. And then the backboard, sometimes this is very loud and sort of crashes to the ground. The backboard, across the back of the chest, folds down, and at the top, underneath the shelf, are 3 hidden compartments. Why don't we use this for a moment, and I will do a little bit of a close-up. One second. Start video. Give us 1 second, folks. I'm going to just sort of, we're changing your camera. And here are those 3 drawers. So the whole backboard, once we took out that central drawer compartment, the whole backboard just sort of crashes down this extra 3 inches, and it exposes these 3 hidden drawers through the back. Now, we've searched through them multiple times. There were no extra special valuables left within this chest, but I thought that this was a really, really cool thing to be able to show you. And again, we'll just get another view of the front. There was the compartment that this piece came from. These are the sort of hidden drawers of that space. And then the last thing I want to bring up to your attention, again, remember this is 1748, is this printed piece of paper of King George V. Now, this was before America found its independence from Britain. So you are looking at the American ruler at that time, the King of England. You have to remember that all Americans were English subjects at this point. And so this was a very honorific place within the interior of this very special cabinet to be able to sort of share with well, to a select view of individuals. These are often called spice chests because spices could be so expensive, so prohibitively expensive at this point. But oftentimes they're listed in inventories as valuables chests. And there are even some inventories where the, I don't know, ribbons and small pieces of jewelry and shoe buckles and other kind of expensive objects have actually been inventoried within the chest itself. So they would not always just for spices, but for other things as well. Are we off? So let me put this back together a little bit.
We have a question coming in asking what floor this exhibit is on. Can you specify for this exhibit we're in as well as this particular piece?
So the exhibit that you're in right now, that I'm sort of showing you through, this is on the museum's first floor. So it's just to the right of the entrance. And this exhibition is on view until I believe it's the 22nd of this month. So not for much longer. Then this particular object will go back on view in Gallery 8 on the museum's second floor. Although it's a little bit more of a rarefied view to be able to see the interior. So aren't you feeling lucky that you got on this call today? So the last group of pieces that I really wanted to sort of hit on are across this back wall here. We're going to take a quick look at these things, then I'm going to give you a quick peek at a piece of furniture that we're considering for purchase here at the museum as well. So first we have sort of 1830s wall clock or bracket clock that was created by a guy named Seth Thomas. He's a New England clockmaker, and this is part of a group of clocks by a local collector that we brought into the collection. Seth Thomas is one of the Americans that helped to revolutionized the clockmaking industry and created clock movements that had lots of interchangeable pieces so that they're very easily fixed and very easily manufactured. The prints that you see here are by a self-trained printmaker at the end of the 1800s in Wilmington, Delaware, named Robert Shaw. Not as well known today, but in his lifetime, he was sort of a rock star of the printed world. He made lots and lots and lots of these prints, and they ended up in collections all over the United States. He also created depictions of his travels to New England and other parts of the eastern coastline. There were publications that featured some of his images. He was not known for printing on particularly nice paper, so a lot of these things have destroyed, but these are in beautiful condition and they are being currently gifted to the museum. And then the last two things that I wanted to bring it to your attention were a pair of illustrations. These are by a guy named Charles McClellan. He was a follower of Howard Pyle, and Howard Pyle was a really well-known instructor of illustration in Wilmington, Delaware he opened up his school in Wilmington, Delaware in 1900, and it was in existence until about 1911 when he died and sort of unexpectedly in Italy. Charles McClellan actually came in about 1910 to study with him. So they didn't study with each other long, but the area that he moved to in Wilmington seemed to agree with him because he stayed for the rest of his life. McClellan was an illustrator. These are paintings that were made for illustrations so that these images would be turned into prints and then reproduced on the covers of Scribner's magazine and other publications as well. And these are actually being gifted to the museum by an artist association called the Studio Group that now occupies Howard Pyle's studio in Wilmington. So as we take a last look at that, I'm going to have you follow me to take a look at this new piece of furniture. I'm kind of saving the best for last. I'm kind of partial to furniture, but this is a great one. We don't get a lot of opportunities here at the museum to collect Victorian furniture, sort of furniture from the last half of the 1800s. There really wasn't a lot of it made within the state. This was also probably not made within the state, but it came out of a house from the 1850s in Milford, Delaware. And as far as anybody who knows about this house or has lived in this house, anybody who is still living remembers this chest, this cabinet in the dining room, really, of that house. And so we had this opportunity, and we're working now with the owners of this piece to potentially purchase it for the permanent collection. So this is sort of an unusual thing, isn't it? It's what we call an ebonized cabinet. So ebonized refers to the coloration. So it's been darkened through a series of almost opaque varnishes that show as pretty black in the surface, as well as these darker green, more translucent varnishes in the front panel and the panels of the lower door. But one of the things that's great about this object is the adaptation. So the ebonized portion of this is really sort of a play off of 17th century British very high style furniture called court cupboards. And the decoration that you see here, these sort of incised decorations, these little bits of carved and chipped edging, the kind of repeated decorations that you see in the background, a lot of this is reminiscent of the British arts and crafts movement of the mid-19th century. Added to that is also this total homage to Japanese aesthetics with these inlaid panels, like the fan-shaped panel across the back with these beautiful flowers and vines growing from a central vase. And then this detail is repeated throughout the front of the cabinet as well. So we have what we call this sort of Anglo-Japanese style of this ebonized cabinet. And this all together, mixing the old British with the new British, with Japanese, with other kinds of artistic techniques and details from other cultures, all blended together into a new kind of whole, is emblematic of what we call the aesthetic movement. The cabinet was probably made in about 1880, could be Philadelphia, could be New York. I'm trying to find other sort of comparables to this thing, something that looks really, really similar to it. I haven't found it yet, but even though it's COVID, I'm still trying to figure it out. And the fact that it came from a Sussex County house with a long history of ownership in one family is just, it really adds something really special. You don't really find this kind of high style Victorian furniture on the peninsula very often. My feeling is that these things were sold off a long time ago, perhaps during the Depression, perhaps during the mid-20th century. But the possibility of being able to bring something like this and interpret it here within the museum is pretty exciting for us. And so this is the last piece of my little tour today. I want to thank you for participating, picking out some of the things that we would choose to take a look at. But I'm going to take the last couple of minutes to ask you if there are any other questions of what we've seen, or if you have any questions about the process of bringing things into the permanent collection, throw them at me.
Ryan, we did have a request earlier that I had missed to look at the Judith Blam.
Oh,
in the corner.
Awesome. Why don't you stand still? It's a small piece. I'm going to bring it to you. So give me 1 second. I will try and stay in the light here. Maybe you can sort of focus in a little bit closer. I don't really actually know a lot about Judith Blam. I do not know what her art education is, but I know that she was practicing as an artist in Wilmington in like the 1920s, 1930s. She started off, and we do have one oil on artist board here, I think it is, of this sort of social realist depiction of a crumbling house in downtown Wilmington, sort of a house that was sort of almost sort of falling into a pile of red bricks. And that was kind of what I knew about the artist, was that she was doing these very realistic depictions, but the sort of, kind of scenes of everyday life in a town that was not really that economically wealthy at the time. So you're having sort of, you're seeing sort of depictions of people that were sort of down on their luck. And then lo and behold, a collector that I know in Wilmington, just north of Wilmington, had a couple of these Judith Blam paintings like the one that you see here. This is watercolor with additional black ink. So a lot of the line work that you see there is ink over the watercolor. And this is much more highly stylized, much more abstract than the other Judith Blams that I had come in contact with. And it's sort of, it's obviously architectural in nature. There are things happening here that talk about buildings, maybe churches. There's an evocation of trees, but really you're just getting this kind of pattern of shard-like shapes across the surface of the work. And the second piece that we brought in as part of this gift is also very similar to this composition, but it's actually sort of a hillside of these kind of triangular shaped houses and buildings. While this is a watercolor, I believe that the second work is actually monoprint. Any other questions that people might have? Well, I'm not going to keep you any longer. Thank you so much for being a part of the tour today. I really appreciate it. Tell all your friends, come down and take a look at this. And remember to come and visit us to see the Salvador Dali exhibition that'll open on the first Friday in December. That's right, we're almost in December. We're almost through 2020, yay. So yes, come and see Salvador Dali. I think you're really gonna enjoy it. And until then, if you have any other questions, just give us a call here at the Biggs Museum of American Art. Thank you.